Hello and good evening, everyone. The open meeting law requires that I notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Therefore, please be aware that an audio and visual recording of this meeting is being made and broadcast by Boston City TV, which is a part of the City of Boston Office of Cable Communications. And now I turn the meeting over to Vice Chair Elizabeth.
Thank you, Jessica. Welcome to the February meeting of the Advisory Board for the Boston Disability Commission. I'll begin the meeting with introductions. I'm Vice Chair Elizabeth Dean Clower.
Hi, I'm Kristen McCosh, the Disability Commissioner for the City of Boston.
Paul Karen, Advisory Board Member.
Carl Richardson, Advisory Board Member.
Olivia Richard, Secretary and Advisory Board Member.
Juan Carlos Ramirez Tapia, Advisory Board Member.
Ducia Dubovskaya, Advisory Board Member and Treasurer.
Wesley Ireland, Disability Advisory Board Member, live in the North End.
Do you want me to read it?
Yardley Sanchez, Advisory Board Member.
With the board's permission, I'd like to take that from the top. I am Elizabeth Dean Clower, Advisory Vice Chair, and my neighborhood is Back Bay.
I wonder if we can just go around and say what neighborhood we live in, just so we have a sense of which communities are represented in the room tonight. So I live in South Boston.
I live in West End, Beacon Hill area.
Brighton.
Brighton.
South End, Boston.
Mission Hill.
Again, as I mentioned before, the North End.
Dorchester, Lower Mills area.
Thank you. And on the phone?
Zaria Husseini, South Boston.
Other members?
Gary Boyd, I'm the chair, and I live in West Roxbury.
Kyle Robidoux, I'm on the advisory committee, and I live in kind of the Roxbury South End neighborhood.
Any other members on the phone? Well, we have a special guest today. The Councillor Ed Flynn has joined us for the evening, so I'd like to welcome him and have him say a few words to us.
Thank you to the Commissioner and to the members for allowing me to attend. But more importantly, I want to say thank you for the great work you're doing on behalf of so many people across Boston. I'm honored to be with you tonight. Just as a way of background, I had the opportunity to serve 25 years in the U.S. Navy, and during that period of time, I became involved with the VA health system, and I'm active with the Disabled American Veterans Organization here in Boston, trying to help disabled vets access medical care. One thing I have been working on as a city council, I'm vice chair of the Civil Rights Commission, and disability rights falls under that. And I'm trying to work closely with you and with the mayor's office to make sure that those in the disability community are treated fairly and treated with respect, treated with dignity. And it's because of you that Boston is a welcoming city to those with disabilities, and the work you're doing here in the city is very important. My parents, who are elderly, have custody of a special needs grandson that lives with my parents in South Boston, so we understand well who has a very difficult time walking, but we understand the challenges that those in the disability community face every day, with my parents walking my nephew, but their grandson. very difficult walking the streets and sidewalks, crossing the streets. So pedestrian access is an important issue. Pedestrian safety is an important issue for me. I know it's an important issue for you as well. And those types of quality of life issues are issues I will continue to work hard on the Boston City Council. But most importantly, I just came by to say thank you to the board, to the commission, for doing excellent work across the city. I also want to say thank you to Mayor Walsh for making Boston a place that treats everybody fairly and with respect, regardless of your ability. So please know, if I could be of any help to anybody on any issues, that I'm always available. Again, thank you, Commissioner, and to the board members for allowing me an opportunity to speak today. Thank you.
Just ask, I believe you had expressed some interest in holding a city council hearing at some point to discuss disability issues in the city?
Yes, I called for a hearing, that we will have a hearing here at the City Council chamber. It hasn't been scheduled yet, but hopefully it will be scheduled, and we'll have the hearing sometime over the next 30 or 60 days. And it will be an opportunity, and we'll certainly notify the commission, invite you to attend and invite you to testify. But it'd be an opportunity for the city and for the city council to know more about the issue, to learn more about the issue, and to see what way the city council can be more helpful on access issues, making sure that those in the disability community know about all the city services available to them throughout the neighborhoods. And it's an opportunity for us to learn more about the issue. But it's something that's important that will get done. And it's a hearing that will, again, take place in 30 or 60 days, but it's something we want to have constant dialogue and contact with your office on. So we'll certainly be updating you on the details of that hearing as well, Commissioner.
Thank you, and I'd also like to thank you for your support with the dockless mobility. When we had that hearing, you were very supportive of pedestrian access and making sure the sidewalks remain primarily for pedestrians and not for dockless bikes and scooters that could impede accessibility for pedestrians.
Yeah, that's an important issue. I see it from, my parents' point of view and from other people's point of view, is when they're walking with our nephew, walking on the sidewalks, and as I said, they're elderly with a special needs child. It's very difficult to navigate the sidewalks. So leaving a scooter or some other bicycle or anything on the sidewalk makes it very difficult for the elderly, for those with disabilities, for children. It's a public safety issue. It's a quality of life issue, and it's about respect and dignity for everybody. So that's something I'm going to continue to work on, and I thank you for your comments, Commissioner. And if anyone has any questions or comments, please let me know. And if not, I'm always around. I'd be glad to answer them at any time.
Thank you, Councilor.
I'd like to second, on behalf of the board, the thanks for the work that you've already done and are continuing to do on behalf of all people with disabilities in the city, other people as well, but recognizing the importance of issues for this community. That's an excellent idea. I think as many people as possible from our commission would be interested, our board would be interested in attending. And the more notice we could be given ahead of time, the better, because of, so we can line up the appropriate accommodations needed and those logistics. But that's very exciting at the beginning of this year to know that you want to pursue that so soon.
Yes, thank you. And the chair of the committee is Councilor Zakim, Josh Zakim, and I'll be working closely with him, working closely with Mayor Walsh's office, working closely with Kristen and the members here as well. So I certainly will give plenty of notice. And as we set the agenda for the hearing, that's when I also want to include you to make sure that your issues that are important to you are also issues that we specifically talk about here on the council. So it's not about what's important to me, it's what's important to you and to your members and in the entire disability community across Boston, making sure that you know, your voice is certainly heard across all of the neighborhoods.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now go to the next agenda item that we're going to approve the minutes from the January meeting. Do I hear a motion?
I make a motion to approve.
Do we go ahead and take the
I
vote?
second that.
Yes. Just as a logistic, I'm just asking the commissioner, do we, if someone had an amendment, do we first vote and then if there's any edits? Or?
Yeah, if someone seconded it and no one spoke up, you can call for a vote.
Great. Okay, we'll go ahead and take a vote on that.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye. Aye. Aye.
And any opposing? Okay, the minutes approve as written. Okay, we'll now move to a new category called announcements. And this is an opportunity for board members to let us know if there are upcoming meetings in the next month or two in your own communities or citywide. I realize there might be some redundancy here that both the commissioner and the chair will also be mentioning meetings, and so some of those we might not explicitly mention, and each month it will be the chair's, at the chair's discretion of whether a particular topic instead of announcement belongs in another category, such as new business. So with that in mind, do we have any announcements of upcoming meetings? I have a list. Okay.
So I'll start with my list, and then the board can give their own meetings or events that they have. So you should all have a schedule of the meeting dates for 2019 in your packet. As you know, we had to rearrange the schedule, so the dates that are on this list are confirmed for 2019. Following up on the dockless bikes conversation, there is another hearing scheduled for February 26th at noon. That's next week, if anybody's interested, and we can also send an email out to remind people. And I don't know if the board wants to consider writing a group letter. That's something that you can take up under new business and decide if you want to write a letter and take a vote to do so, if you're interested. The mayor is hosting a reception for boards and commissions again this year. Some of you attended last year, and it will be held this year on March 4th at 5:30 at the Emerson College Dining Center on Boylston Street. If you didn't get an email invitation or an invitation in the mail, you should get one this week. March 4th, yes, at 5:30. Our ADA training is confirmed for March 8th. That's a Friday, from 2:30 to 5:30 in the Piemonte room, which is on this floor down the hall in the city council offices. If people can't make it right at 2:30, please feel free to come whenever you can get here. Even if you catch part of the training, that will be helpful. It's for the board, just an overview of the ADA, just to give some basic knowledge to people who might not be as familiar with it as others. And even if you do know a lot about the ADA, it's a great chance to ask questions. Stacy Hart from the ADA New England Technical Assistance Center will be presenting, and she's a great resource for questions. Yep. It's going to be March 8th, a Friday, from 2:30 to 5:30. In other local events, Judy Heumann, who is a disability rights activist, is going to be speaking at Brandeis on March 7th from 5 to 7:30. If anyone's interested in seeing her speak. She was one of the founders of the independent living movement, and she's a great advocate for disability rights, accessibility, and inclusion. The Real Abilities Film Festival will be March 26th through April 3rd. Brochures are being printed as we speak, and the website should be updated this week. There's a state employment career fair on Friday, April 5th from 10 to 1 at the Transportation Building. And this is specifically a career fair for people with disabilities. Mental Health Advocacy Day at the State House is on April 2nd. Deaf and Hard of Hearing Day at the State House is May 15th. And our ADA Day is July 23rd. It's a Tuesday from 12 to 2 on City Hall Plaza. I know that was a long list, but we will email you out the dates as a follow-up to this meeting. Carl?
I just have a couple more days at the State House to add that I'm aware of. Along with Deaf and Hard of Hearing Day and Mental Health Day, we also have Deaf Blind Awareness Day, which is March 28th, and Blind Day, Blindness Legislative Information Networking Day, which is March 19th.
Okay, thanks. Any other announcements? As I'll be referencing again in the chair's report, the RTAG meeting is the next meeting for the transportation RTAG meeting will occur on February 28th at 10 Park Plaza, the transportation building, from 5:30 to 7:30. And after, there are some upcoming meetings from the associated with Better Bus, but since we have a presentation about that and already have had a lengthy announcement list, I think I'll defer that for the chair's report. So with that, we'll now move to the Better Bus project.
So good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Moran. It is my second day on the job at the new BTD transit team, so please go easy on me. I'm not unfamiliar with City Hall, though. I've been working here for the past 2 years with the BPDA's transportation team, so familiar with a lot of the issues and a lot of the faces around here. So, quick overview. I'll tell you a little bit about the new BTD transit team, a bit of background on the MBTA's Better Bus program, a bit of the public engagement and what the next steps are. So, what is the new transit team? I apologize for that formatting, getting a little bit messed up there. But so we are within the BTD's Policy and Planning Division, which is overseen by Vineet Gupta. And we serve as the city's primary point of contact on transit issues. So that's everything from bus, subway, commuter rail, ride, and ferry services, bus stop, and other existing MBTA infrastructure on city streets, MassDOT and MBTA planning studies that might be happening in the city of Boston, and shuttle and non-MBTA transit services in Boston. So that would be private shuttles that you might see operating in places like the Seaport. We are also looking to implement city transit priorities. So if you know Go Boston 2030, one priority this year will be the Brighton Avenue rapid bus concept. We're also looking at advancing transit studies, such as the Seaport Transit Strategic Plan, and coordinating with, of course, other parts of BTD, the Boston Planning and Development Agency, and Public Works on various projects. Development review, public works projects that might involve new infrastructure, and so forth, and how they relate to transit. So who is the new transit team? So it is myself. I'm the new transit team director. We also recently hired Lindy Way Renette, who joins us as a transit planner, and in the future we'll be hiring 3 operations staff to help with bus pilots and transit maintenance programs. So a bit on the Better Bus program. So what is the MBTA's Better Bus program? So it's looking at improving, it's the first step in improving the bus system overall. It's a key part of their $8 billion modernization work, which includes subways, buses, and the commuter rail network. It's looking to reinvent the bus network to to understand where changing demographics, the new fare collection system, and bring MBTA assets into a state of good repair. And it has several components. So there's this one about continuous change, which is ongoing throughout the process. It's analysis of proposed near-term changes, which is where we are now. And then there's a multi-year investment strategy, which will lead to the bus network redesign, which will be a much more comprehensive bus network change. But where we are now, we're really looking at 47 revenue neutral changes to the bus network. And the goal is to provide a much more frequent and reliable bus service throughout Greater Boston. As I said before, these changes are revenue neutral, so don't expect many of these to be earth-shattering, but they will certainly help speed up reliability. So one example that I just want to highlight here is the proposed consolidation of the Crosstown 1 and Route 1 routes. So if you know Crosstown 1 and Route 1, they both go from Cambridge, across the Charles River into the Back Bay, and the Crosstown 1 route continues on to the BU Medical area, and Route 1 continues to Dudley Square. So Crosstown 1 would effectively be eliminated, and those buses that are currently part of Crosstown 1 services would be rededicated to Route 1 services. This means faster, more reliable service on the 1 bus service, shorter headways, less schedule variation for riders. But of course, there's some concerns, and that key concern is a longer walk to destinations in the BU Medical campus. So what's the public engagement strategy like for the T? So they actually have a bus that they bring around to different locations throughout Greater Boston, and they have, it's essentially a touring bus with different MBTA materials on it. So pamphlets to highlight what exactly is proposed to be changed, people on board who can answer questions. They are hosting a series of community meetings throughout the Greater Boston area on these proposed changes. There's an online comments form, and I should also note the comments are due by March 13th, so just keep that date in mind. So how can you get involved? Well, if you want to learn more about specific route changes, you can go to this website, betterbus.mbta.com. There's a survey there, and you can fill out the survey so you can look at what the specific impact is and then tell the T what your thought is on that. There's a link here in this presentation, and then I can follow up with Sarah to send it around to the group about where the next community meetings are being held. They're hosting roughly half a dozen, and they're geographically well spread out. So there's still several more of those that will happen. And you can also email the BTD Transit team. So that's myself or Lindy Way. And you see our email addresses right here. So I'm just matthew.moran@boston.gov. So any thoughts, comments, we want to hear from you about what your thoughts are. So what are the next steps for the BTD Transit team? So we're conducting meetings with City Hall staff on these Better Bus recommendations to really understand how these Better Bus recommendations will impact specific neighborhoods or specific routes or specific rides. And so we really want to understand from City Hall staff what these changes are going to mean. And what we're planning to do is use all of this feedback to write a comprehensive comment letter and share that with the T and get that to the T. So I think I can open this up to any questions that anyone has about Better Bus or, for that matter, the transit team in general. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Carl?
So if I remember correctly, at the last meeting, Olivia had a question which I am now going to ask. Has this been looked at from a Title VI perspective, meaning how it impacts various minority communities and things like that?
Sure. So my understanding is that the T, as part of this, will do a full Title VI assessment. I haven't been involved with that process, but my understanding is that that is being done through this process. Yeah.
Dosia?
Oh, yes, here's Dosia again. I have two questions. The first one is, it's probably obvious and you've probably already mentioned it, but what does the acronym BTD stand for? That's
Sure.
my first question.
Sorry, so that's Boston Transportation Department.
Okay, and second question is, so for example, if disabled people have any concerns regarding buses, or for example, if they have issues with if they have any concerns about issue with MBTA staff, for instance, can they also use this website to say, listen, I've had this issue come up, how can we improve the situation or anything like that? Thank you.
Sure, thank you for the question. So my understanding is that the comments that they are looking to receive are specific to the changes that are being proposed through the Better Bus project on this website. But there are MBTA forums that you can comment about specific issues with a bus driver or anyone else. Again, you can also contact one of us if you feel like it's something that would be good to have the city take a look at, and we can certainly follow up with our contacts at the T.
Yardley.
Hi there, Yardley here. When is the meeting with the City Hall staff taking place?
I'm sorry, say that one more time?
When is the meeting with City Hall staff taking place?
So we're having various neighborhood meetings, neighborhood-focused meetings, I should say. So they've been taking place over the past several weeks.
Okay. Are there any ones coming up?
We're still going to have Dorchester and Mattapan coming up in the next few weeks.
I mean, particularly City Hall staff. You said you hold the BP.
I work for BTD, and I was formerly with BPDA. Sure. Okay.
But you said you guys will be holding meetings with City Hall staff to get their inputs and feedback?
Exactly. So, for example, the Office of Neighborhood Services has individual staff members dedicated to specific communities. So we've been hosting, meetings with ONS staff, BPDA staff who are dedicated to community planning issues in those neighborhoods, BTD staff who are looking at community planning issues, transportation planning issues in those neighborhoods, really trying to get like a good technical understanding of what these changes are and sort of how they'll impact the various neighborhoods and communities. Please.
Ask you to reach out to Health and Human Services.
Certainly.
Yardley works for Chief Martinez, so there may be, if you email the chief, he may have some departments or staff who would like to know more.
Olivia?
Certainly, thank you.
Yeah, are you guys also working with the Housing Authority in any capacity with this project in terms of, I know that when the realignment of the 32 happened, the Route 32, it disenfranchised a whole building of elders and people with disabilities from their closest bus stop. They now have to walk a significantly farther way. Is that sort of thing being taken into consideration either with Age Strong or with the Housing Authority?
Sure. So we haven't had any meetings with the Housing Authority yet, and that's because most of these changes are really tweaks to the existing routes. I didn't notice anything that sort of jumped off the page at me that would significantly impact any large BHA sites. With that said, it's an excellent idea, so we'll reach out to them. And to answer your second question, yes, we are planning to have meetings with the Disabilities Commission and Age Strong Commission to make sure that we get those voices heard.
Go ahead.
Hi, Matt. Thank you for coming today. This is Juan Ramirez. You were mentioning about a survey that is available for the public to enter some information. I was wondering if you can expand a little. What kind of information are you trying to get from the survey? And if there is any kind of exploration for how to improve services for people with disabilities, if you're trying to find out more information through that survey?
Yeah, sure. So the MBTA is running the survey. So this is very much their project, and we're really reacting to it from the city side. So insofar as we're interested in learning and understanding more about how any of these proposed changes can better the lives of people in Boston. So to that extent, we'd love to hear your specific feedback. And if you want to submit feedback to them as well, I think that would be all the better.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, our next agenda item is the Alston-Brighton Mobility Study. Oh, I forgot to spell the font.
Good evening, Commissioner McCosh and members of the Commission. My name is Tad Reed, and I'm head of the Transportation and Infrastructure Planning team at the Boston Planning and Development Agency. And I'm pleased to present tonight a short summary of the work we've begun on the Allston-Brighton Mobility Study, or for short, we call it the AB Mobility Study. Just to give you a quick overview of what I'd like to talk about, just tell you a little bit about the nature of the study and the schedule for it, why we're doing this study now, how we're using Go Boston 2030, our long-range transportation plan, as a point of departure, how we're engaging with the public, the initial steps of the process involving data collection and research and public engagement, and then the next steps in the study. So the image on the screen shows the boundaries of the Allston-Brighton area, and just for those who may not be able to see the screen, on the north edge is the Charles River, from Malvern Street and Packett's Corner all the way over to the border with Newton. On the southern edge is Brookline, and bisecting the areas are the planning area is the Mass Turnpike, Cambridge Street, and Washington Street. It's one of the largest neighborhoods in the city. The planning process will be an 18-month process that was kicked off in September. We've had a couple of community meetings already, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. We've hired a consulting firm of Kittleson and Associates, together with two other sub-consultants, Arup and Associates and NBBJ, to help us on this study. The next image shows timelines for the study, showing approximately 18 months from beginning to end. We're approximately 3 months into the study, where we're still focusing on data collection and research and preliminary engagement with the public to hear what public concerns, complaints, issues, and ideas are related to their getting around their neighborhood. And I want to say this focuses on all modes. This focuses on pedestrians, bikes, transit, and vehicular traffic as well. As you know, transportation planning in Boston is not something that's done just by the city. It's done by a number of state agencies as well. Even within the city, we have two departments, the Boston Planning and Development Agency and the Boston Transportation Department, working on transportation planning issues. We're often tag teaming. We're working together with the Boston Transportation Department. But in addition, you have the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, the MBTA, Massport, and this is just to let you know we're coordinating closely with all of those agencies who have infrastructure and service running through this area. Oh, I should also say that we formed an interdepartmental working group within the city comprised of representatives of the Boston Transportation Department, the Public Works Department, and most recently the Disabilities Commission. And we will be working with that working group over the course of the project to guide and shape the recommendations of the mobility study. So why now? Why are we pursuing this study now? The simple answer is new development. If you look at the diagram on the screen, you'll see speckled throughout the planning area a number, the locations of numerous, probably a couple of dozen of proposed and pending development projects, totaling about 8 million square feet. That's a lot of new development. Most of it is residential. Some of that has been approved. Some of it has merely been proposed and is pending approval. But that's a lot of development. It's raising concerns in the neighborhood about the capacity of the existing system to accommodate development. And so that's one of the primary reasons we're doing this study now. Of course, we're using as a point of departure our sort of long-term roadmap for transportation planning in the city of Boston. You may be familiar with Go Boston 2030, the transportation plan adopted by the city a couple of years ago. And we're relying on the mode share goals from that study. Mode is simply the way you get around. Mode is by bike, by walking, by vehicle, by transit. The share is the percentage of trips made by each of those modes, each of those types of travel. So the goals of Go Boston 2030 are to increase transit trips by 1/3, to increase walking by 1/2, increase biking 4 times, and to decrease automobile usage by 1/2. So those are goals that are serving as, again, sort of a foundation, a springboard for this study. How do we facilitate increasing those more sustainable mode shares? As I mentioned before, we launched the study back in September. We had a community meeting attended by well over 100 people. And shown on the screen here are just a flavor of some of the comments we heard at that meeting. We heard some very granular comments, such as signal timing at many intersections causes too much delay. There needs to be improved pedestrian access to green space. There's a significant need for improved crosswalks, which would be, of course, of interest to members of the Disability Commission on Disabilities, I would imagine, and then the need for improved lighting and visibility throughout. Those are that's just a flavor for some of the comments related to pedestrian movement. Related to transit, for example, we heard there's a need to consolidate bus stops. Too many bus stops can slow down service. There's a need for better bus stop signage. Many people are interested in priority lanes for the number 57 and the number 66 buses, and there's a desire for signal prioritization on the green line. Again, just a flavor for some of the comments that we've heard already. As I mentioned before, we're still in the research and data collection phase, and we've looked at a number of sources. We already had a number of sources in-house. For example, you may be familiar with Vision Zero, which is the project to reduce transportation-related deaths in the city to 0. And as part of an effort to solicit public feedback on Vision Zero starting in 2016, a number of comments were solicited throughout Boston neighborhoods, including over 600 comments in the Boston-Brighton neighborhood. So we mined that information, and we mined crash information from the Boston emergency services and police departments. And we put together some maps, and the maps, if you can't see the maps on the screen, basically what these maps do is they show where there are concentrations of crashes, and by crashes I mean vehicular crashes, pedestrian crashes, bike crashes in the Allston-Brighton neighborhood, as well as comments voiced by over 600 members in the community about where they have concerns about transportation and mobility issues for all modes. And we came up with what we're calling these heat maps here, which basically, if you can't see them, show where there are concentrations of crashes and concentrations of comments. And we put together all those maps, and you can see a bunch of maps here showing motor vehicle crashes, pedestrian crashes, comments about bicycle safety, pedestrian safety, pedestrian crossings, and combine them into a single map, which you see here. This map is our combined heat map that combines all the comments, and you can begin to see where there are clusters of concerns. So then we're taking this map and creating a map that identifies priority areas for attention and improvement. This is just a preliminary map, but you can begin to see there's certain corridors and certain intersections in Allston-Brighton that light up on this map and scream out for attention. And those are the areas where we're giving a lot of attention to right now. We're taking these back out to the public for confirmation and additional ideas, but this is providing one of the bases for what will become recommendations of the study. This is just a later iteration of the map that shows what corridors and what intersections need attention. This map shows in blue, the blue dots on this map show the corridors and intersections that already have planned improvements. In other words, we're not starting from scratch here. There are already many plans underway, many improvements underway. We won't repeat those improvements, but we will certainly add to them. The lines and dots in red show where improvements are still needed. There's a lot of work to be done out here. Also, we want to wait until springtime when more people are walking and biking again to do counts for biking and walking. So we'll probably wait until about mid-April to get some current counts on walking and biking activity in the neighborhood. So there's still additional data collection to do. And then what are the next steps? What are we going to be doing next? Well, most of you have received on your table a flyer. I'll hold it up. This is a flyer that shows there are 3 area workshops. We've divided the Allston-Brighton neighborhood into 3 different areas, Area 1, Area 2, and Area 3. And we're holding workshops in those areas to solicit feedback at a slightly more granular level to find out what specific concerns people may have about that area, and then also zeroing in on specific geographies, intersections, corridors that we know to be of specific concern. For example, we know in Area 1, the area north of the Turnpike, that the Lincoln Street corridor is of particular concern to people, as is Barry's Corner. The first area workshop happened last week, so there are 2 more happening if you're interested. The next one will be next Thursday, February 28th from 4 to 6 p.m. at the Tavern Allston in Allston Village, and this is intended in large part to get the attention of merchants in the area who may be concerned about issues in Union Square and North Harvard Street, but also issues throughout all of that area. And then the third workshop will be at the Brighton Public Library on March 4th. There are different ways to participate. At these workshops, we'll be focusing on getting people to think about different interventions that may be useful in their neighborhoods. So we have a matrix, which I'm holding up right now, which shows a list of possible improvements you might want to think about. For example, an improved crosswalk, a curb bulb out, which widens the curb at certain locations to make the crossings shorter, intersection tables where you raise the elevation of an intersection to slow vehicles down and to improve traffic safety. There's sort of a whole host or toolbox menu of ideas that we're presenting and asking people to think about whether or not they may apply in certain areas.
Excuse me, we'll need to have you begin wrapping it up, please.
Sure. And just along those lines, there's an online toolbox as well, and the link to that toolbox is shown right here at maps.kittleson.com/Allston-Brighton. That concludes the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions, Paul?
Yeah, Paul Karen. I just have a quick question about the costs. I know it's through the BPDA and the city and state agencies. How about any of the universities? Are they helping out with any of the costs at all? Just considering it's large developments in the area, are universities and a lot of the students who have access to these?
Yes, well,
consulting fees maybe?
So the study is being funded in part mostly by the BPDA, but 10% of our budget will be used to identify what we're calling a quick build or near-term improvements. And those are the kinds of improvements we would expect to ask private developers to pay for. But this study would design those improvements. So the idea, one of the major ideas of the study is that we would develop a menu of possible improvements that we would ask private development to undertake.
Any other questions? Any questions from on the phone? Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, we'll go to the CODA AAB presentation.
Hello, my name is Lenny Somerville. I work at the Disability Policy Consortium. The first thing I want to talk about just very quickly is a project that the Disability Policy Consortium runs called CODA. It's a monthly meeting by phone for disability commissions in Massachusetts to share experiences with each other, advise each other on different projects, and sometimes also work together to create things like policy guides or proposals. So it's every first Wednesday of the month from 12 to 1. And some of the things that the group has accomplished in the last year include creating a guide for how to get access to parking funds for local disability commissions, created a policy proposal that was presented to the Architectural Access Board on accessible pedestrian signals, and created a guide for political advocacy at multiple different levels, local, state, federal, et cetera, for disability commissions in Massachusetts. So if anybody is interested in being a part of that, again, it's the first Wednesday of every month from noon to 1, and you can ask Patricia or myself how to gain access to it. The second thing I'd like to talk about is a bill that is currently before the Massachusetts legislature. It's been introduced for its 19th year. This is called an act relative to the Architectural Access Board. It was introduced by Representatives Barber and Moran in the House and Senator Moore in the Senate. This bill would extend the jurisdiction of the Architectural Access Board to cover employee-only spaces. Right now, they have no jurisdiction over employee spaces. They can't make any comments, recommendations, or regulations governing them, as well as closing a loophole in housing development around adaptability. Right now, as long as the shell of a building, or the shell or some part of a building really was built before 1991, it has no adaptability requirements. It still has accessibility requirements if it's a large enough scale housing development, but if it's pre-91, there's no requirements on adaptability. This would close that loophole for gut renovations of old non-residential buildings. So factories, schools, old municipal buildings that are being turned into apartment buildings were not previously housing, but the original textile mill was built well before 1991. This bill would allow the board to require them to have adaptability features. The employment piece would essentially bring the ADA to Massachusetts when it comes to employment. We used to be ahead of the curve back in the 70s when the board was created. We have since fallen well behind because it is, according to state law, perfectly legal to build an office building that is completely inaccessible. As long as you don't have any public access spaces, it doesn't have to be accessible according to state law. So this bill would fix that. One of the things that is going to be crucial to get it passed is a broad array of support both from the disability community and other groups. So disability commissions support, active support for this bill is going to be hugely important. And the Boston Disability Commission is in a uniquely important position as the chair of Ways and Means is once again a member of the Boston delegation. And in order to get to the floor for a vote, the bill will have to go through the Ways and Means Commission. So ways that we are asking people to support this bill are having commissions endorse it, both sign on to letters in support of it alongside other commissions and other groups like independent living centers, as well as send their own letters, set up meetings with members of their delegation, especially those who have not signed on as co-sponsors, in order to urge them to support the bill, and also to get, so disability commissions often, sometimes, will have relationships with local developers, local employers that the Disability Policy Consortium does not have. And the support of developers and employers on this bill is going to be very, very important, because the opposition right now is large developers and large employer groups. Having a few employers come forward or a few developers come forward and say, actually, the board is not a threat to me. I personally think access is important and would appreciate it if the board could advise me on it, would be huge. So helping make connections both with those groups and also with community members who can speak to how deeply, deeply important these issues are. One thing that I will hear at the State House sometimes from people who are especially just very new to the job is that they don't see how this is an issue for more than a handful of people, or surely it can't be that bad. So bringing home the importance of housing access and employment access and what happens when you don't have it are also going to be very, very important. So that's a little bit about the AAB bill, and what you can do to support it. I'm going to wrap up because I don't want to take any more time than necessary.
Thank you. As you've indicated, the Boston Disability Commission does want to have an active leadership role. I know Carl, among others, is very interested in this topic, and in a previous year, in its 19-year attempt history, I knew of a situation where a variance was requested to not have an elevator go to a location because it was going to be for employees only. So then, again, by definition, you couldn't be an employee with a mobility disability and be situated in that area. And I know there are many other examples of the way that it limits people. So, in the coming months, and with the leadership of people on our commission, we look forward to working with you and others. Other questions or comments?
Is the bill still in docket, or has it been assigned a bill number and assigned to a committee?
Last I checked, which was yesterday, it was still on, everything was pretty much still in dockets. So right now we're HD 2021 and SD 814. There is an additional bill in the Senate that was filed by Senator Barrett. It's almost, it's almost identical to Senator Moore's bill. The only difference is it left out some new language from last session around the housing piece. Those bills are probably going to be combined during the committee process. It's not really conflicting. He just wasn't aware that anybody else was filing, so he rushed to get it done ahead of the deadline.
That might have been my fault. I had Senator Barrett file the bill.
Well, I'm glad we got that cleared up.
Yeah.
Are there other questions? Sorry. Oh, sure.
Hi, I just want it noted that last month we did vote to write a letter, and I apologize, that's actually an oversight on my part to not attach that in the email that was sent out last week. We have a draft letter that is a letter in support of the bills that we were going to send out to the board. Who it is addressed to and the address, because it is not yet in committee, we don't have that yet. But the idea was that we would draft the letter, send it to each of you for feedback and input, and then through our intergovernmental relations department would have that letter sent to the appropriate individuals when the time came that there were appropriate individuals to send it to. So I will make sure that that letter gets sent to you guys this week for everybody to give their input and feedback.
Carl?
Lene makes an excellent point. Regardless of which committee it gets assigned to, Senator Michael Rodriguez is now chair of Ways and Means, and Boston is his territory, so he should at least be copied on it. because eventually the bill will go to Ways and Means.
Great, we will note that and discuss that with intergovernmental.
Any other comments on the phone? Okay, thank you. All right, with that, we'll move to the chair's report. I am here today in Jerry's place because I'm able to be on site, but fortuitously, we do have Jerry on the phone, so as you can see by the third chair, that we have the combination of Jerry's input and my ability to call on you in the room. And I'm frankly humbled to be in this chair because both Carl and Jerry made it look very easy to be up here understanding the microphones and the setup, and we're very pleased to be in this room, but that too is an extra piece as well as today's cameras. So with that, Jerry and I have a couple of quick updates for you. One of which is to dovetail on the prior presentation of the Better Bus program. There are a few neighborhood meetings that are coming up in the next couple of weeks. The first of which is that the Forest Hills Station will be hosting an open house meeting for anyone who's interested. And that will take place on February 27th from 3 to 5 p.m. And then at the Malden station, there will be another open house meeting for the public from 4 to 6 p.m. So those are two upcoming meetings that if people would like to participate, they're being held right at the stations. Moving on, I apologize, go ahead.
Can you repeat the time and day for the Malden?
Certainly. The Malden one is on March 4th from 4 to 6 p.m.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Okay. The next order of business is that there'll be an upcoming meeting of the that the RTAG Executive Board will be hosting for public input, and that will occur on February 28th from 5:30 to 7:30 at the Transportation Building, 10 Park Plaza. And with that, Jerry, are there additional comments or information you'd like to provide?
Just to comment on the RTAG a little bit. There will be a presentation at that time by Better Bus, and there'll be soliciting public comment at that time as well. So they'll be able to take, folks with disabilities, concerns, comments, suggestions, whatever, regarding the project and the proposed changes to the 47 bus routes at that time. So I would encourage anyone who's interested in these issues to join us at the general meeting of the RTAG on the 28th.
Thank you. And can you remind folks what the acronym, what that stands for?
Riders Transportation Access Group.
Thank you. And additionally, with the fare increase at the for the MBTA, there is a public input going on at this time. I don't know, Jerry or Commissioner, if you know, when Jerry and I had discussed this, it was not clear to me subsequent in looking it up of a specific deadline date, but are either of...
Initially was the 28th, but I think it's been moved, and I'll try to find out when the deadline is, and I'll try to disseminate that to folks as well. So,
thanks. with that, the one additional topic that Jerry and I had discussed is revisiting the issue of committees that board members are interested in, because neither he nor I received specific recommendations, and although there are a number of different important topics, some of which we've heard this evening from from transportation to employment to housing, that the board does have to both decide, given our interests and expertise and prioritization, which we want to focus on for this year. And so Jerry and I and the other executive board members will be meeting, and we will elicit more specific input, because we already as a group had identified the interest in transportation and in the AAB bill, but there have been some other excellent ideas floating around, and another issue that we'll continue to discuss in the next couple of monthly meetings is that as a board member, when we have the level of enthusiasm and advocacy that we do, that although it's very important that we receive reports and hear input for other presentations, that we need more active time ourselves to help delineate these. I know some of us had wanted to have a retreat, and I don't know about the logistics of that, but all the more so if we're not able to have a separate retreat, then to have some of this time that we have monthly as time that we can further focus on interests of ours. So with that, are there any questions for the chair's report? Anyone on the, okay, sure.
Right.
Go
Can I make it?
Go ahead.
Okay. So my question about the, doing subcommittees is that, I have some ideas like a board member, and I want to make sure that, they're realistic for this group. And that's probably one of the reasons why I was hesitated in sending any recommendations, because I'm not sure how far this step of this can go. For example, one of the things that I was thinking about is health and well-being of individuals with disabilities in the Boston area and social networking, and just having an avenue for people to share information. So again, I don't know if that's something that is realistic to offer to this committee or not.
Yeah. I apologize. We're having difficulty with hearing the details. I think that we might need to carry on this discussion offline. That I don't feel I could adequately summarize it just based on the way the phone was breaking up. But we really appreciate your input, and so Jerry and I think more expeditiously will be in touch with the board members to figure that out. If there are no other questions, that concludes the chair's report. And we'll now move to the commissioner's report.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So I don't have a very long report because we just met 3 weeks ago due to the 2.5 weeks ago due to the change in the schedule. But a few things I wanted to bring to your attention. There are 3 fairly significant master plans that are happening in city departments right now that we're going to be a part of. The first one is the Boston Public Library. They're starting a master planning process in the spring to look at the McKinn building, which is the old building of the library. Specifically for interest to our community is looking at the front entrance. As we know, thanks to great advocacy of the board and an individual Boston resident, they installed a semi-permanent ramp last year, earlier this year, so that the front entrance is now accessible. However, they want to build a permanent ramp, a very nice artistic structure, so they don't have a temporary metal ramp up there for long. So that's going to be worked into the master plan. And also, there are two rooms, two meeting rooms in the library in the old building, the McKim building, that the only way you can access them right now is with a lift, a vertical lift. That is the map room and the Commonwealth Salon. So we're going to be looking at those areas to see if there's a way to improve accessibility to those rooms. Unfortunately, there was a meeting scheduled a few weeks ago on to give updates on the PCA program, scheduled by Mass Health, and there was some communication where the library staff told the people at Mass Health the rooms was accessible, and it was one of these rooms which is technically accessible, but when you have 20 and 30 people coming in wheelchairs trying to go up that lift, it was not very accessible. So I'm working on communication with the library and looking at different strategies to try to improve accessibility. Another master plan that's happening is the Parks Department is working on a master plan for Boston Common. There is a large barrier in the Common that we've been interested in working on for a long time, and that is the set of steps at the Shaw Memorial, which go from the Common up to Beacon Street across from the State House. Right now, if you're in the Common and you can't use the steps, there's no way to get to the State House except to go back to Tremont Street and walk all around up Park Street to Beacon Street. So it's a really long path to travel, and it's not, even that path is not very accessible. So we had worked with the Parks Department for a few years to try to get some measurements of slopes and come up with some design concepts to either do a ramp or an exterior elevator in the Common. So this will be included in the master planning. Another big piece of the master plan for the Common is the Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King Memorial, which is underway now. The committee is deciding on the final design in the next few months, so we look forward to that. And some of the designs actually had accessibility for this area built into them, so that would be exciting if that is a piece of it. But I will keep you updated on those plans. The third master plan that we're working on is for City Hall Plaza. You may have noticed that there were no winter activities scheduled outside this winter, and that's because they're updating infrastructure on the plaza, which has to do with everything from electricity and water to surface materials and areas of delineating areas of usage, like a big area for concerts and a smaller area for gatherings and meetings. So we're involved with those plans, also looking at wayfinding on the plaza. So I'll keep you updated on all those things. And these are really big, huge initiatives, so if we can have input, it will go a long way towards increasing accessibility systemically in these areas of Boston. Just two other meetings I wanted to talk to you about. We met with a representative from Lime Bikes. Lime, that's L-I-M-E Bikes. They're a national company who oversees dockless bikes and scooters. And we talked to them about accessibility in two areas. First of all, they're well aware of the issues with keeping sidewalks clear, and we emphasize that point to look at being proactive in clearing sidewalks, but also making sure they stay on top of enforcement when people don't clear their bikes out of the path of travel. But other than that, we also advocated to have the vehicles themselves be accessible, which is the scooters and the bikes. Now, we know that not every disability can benefit from these vehicles, but some certainly can, and this was something that the Lime representative hadn't thought of. So we asked him if he had reached out to the disability community about these issues, and he didn't think that they had. He wasn't aware that they had, so we asked him to start with that, to maybe hold a meeting or do an email and reach out to people with disabilities to talk about accessibility issues. So he was very open to that, and we plan to follow up with him just to stay in the loop about what the next plans are. Because as we know, these vehicles are not allowed on the streets of Boston yet, but they may be in the very near future. And then the last thing is that I attended a talk at Harvard University last week. The New York City Disability Commissioner, Victor Calisi, was speaking about accessibility in New York. And I was really impressed with the accessibility in the city, but also really happy to see that all of the issues he's working on are similar ones to things we're working on. Things like bike lanes, trying to solve for bike lanes and people with visual disabilities. Another thing that they're working on that we're also working on is, I don't know if you've seen a new design feature, which is stadium seating for active areas like plazas and indoor areas where they have rows of stairs that are also used for seating. So a very inventive way that we're working on that is to make the stadium steps an actual ramp so that you can go up around it and get from the top to the bottom and also sit in the middle. So New York has done that on the High Line, and we just worked with a company who presented recently to have that design in the Great Hall in the new Winthrop Square development. So really innovative things that New York and Boston are doing, we were really excited to collaborate on. And Victor is also hosting a conference in May in New York for all the disability commissioners across the country. So I'll be attending that, and I'll get to meet my colleagues from, there's probably 20 of us we do a monthly call. So I'll get to meet disability commissioners from California and Texas and Baltimore and Pennsylvania, Minnesota, and a number of others. So I'm excited about that. So we'll share best practices, and I'll report back to you at the June meeting. And that wraps up my report. If anyone has questions. Carl?
So I heard you say on the master plan regarding the Boston Common with the steps going up to the State House, the input would be valuable. Would it help? I get complaints all the time as ADA coordinator at the State House. Would it help if I got a letter from the State House saying that we would appreciate that those steps being made accessible?
Yes, I definitely think a collaboration between the city and the state, because it's definitely the State House, which is, it's part of the Freedom Trail, this route. So when they have people with disabilities on the Freedom Trail, they have to detour, and they can't go on the standard route.
Right, and it happens, and I see it happen almost every day.
Yeah.
So,
and there's also the Shaw Memorial is right there.
Right.
So people can't access that. So yeah, I think we can definitely collaborate on that.
Okay, so I'll put together a letter and have it signed by the superintendent of the State House to send to you.
Great.
I have a quick comment about, and a question about going back to the meeting you mentioned at the map room at the Boston Public Library. I attended that meeting, and it was not a mere matter of inconvenience with that lift. It really was a safety issue, that if the building had to be evacuated, the logistics of it, it was very difficult. I, like a number of people, I'm accustomed when needed to have to use those lifts, and it was one of the more difficult ones I've ever tried to negotiate getting in and out of with just one chair. And so I didn't know, I don't know that such things exist for a checklist for if a meeting is going to be in a certain place. And even I think because that one would have, they might have felt they could even check a box that said it was wheelchair accessible. Can we find out, elevator versus lift so that we can avoid that?
We're working, I'm working internally with the director of the library, so we'll make sure that message, and Mass Health did check to say that it was accessible, and it is technically accessible, but when you have a meeting with 20 or 30 wheelchairs, it's definitely not a great site for it. So we'll definitely, I'm gonna add language right to the event application page that says this, and that was really a matter of communication. So we can improve communication with the library event staff, and then also work at looking at the lift itself. And we're working on that internally, but I will definitely update you if there's a chance for the community to be involved.
Great. And are there other, I don't know how many other spaces might have, that probably is more the exception than the rule of places that are a public access building in Boston that you only utilize a lift for a conference space, but
they're only required. I mean, they're only allowed in existing spaces. They're not allowed in new construction.
Yeah.
And this was put in several years ago. I believe it was before I was working for the city, so I don't know the history of it, but the staff at property management for the city who oversee facilities at the library have been very helpful and accommodating. They're looking into the situation right now as we speak, and we're going to do a site visit, and we're really going to look at it. So it will definitely be on the top of my list of to-dos.
Excellent. Thank you. If there are no other questions for the commissioner, we'll move on then to, oh, sorry.
I had a question, Elizabeth.
Go ahead.
It's Jerry.
Go ahead, Jerry.
Commissioner, thanks for bringing up those master plans, and I know you said you'll keep us updated, but is there anything that we need to do, like, you know, kind of quickly on any of those issues, or?
Well, one thing about master plans is they don't really move quickly. So, no, I would say there's nothing you need to do at this point. But some of them, like the library one, hasn't even started yet. I don't believe the Boston Common one has started yet. And City Hall Plaza has been going on, and we've been giving, you know, input as we go. So I will, you know, there's always a chance for public comment. And at that time, you know, I do my advocating internally. And then at that time, if the board wants to, you know, submit comments as a group, I think that would be a great thing to, you know, emphasize the message that we're trying to send. But thank you.
I guess it was wishful thinking on my part that things would move quickly, but I definitely think as a board, we definitely want to keep abreast of those issues and definitely participate in the public comment period.
Great.
Okay, we'll now move to the architectural access update.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good evening, everyone. My name is Patricia Mendez, and I am the Architectural Access Specialist for the Commission for Persons with Disabilities. I have a brief update, architectural update, but I also want to follow up on Elizabeth, a comment about our checklist. We have been finalizing a couple, one new checklist that is for events specifically in the city, and we have updated two other checklists. One is for the city plaza events, and the last checklist upgrade is for Article 80 review for BPDA projects. So those will be shared pretty soon and used. And thank you for bringing that up. The other update is a project in East Boston on Condor Street. This is an arts space project, and it also has living units. It has a total of 40 units. 7 of them are condominiums, 33 are apartments for rent. And in the street side, on Condor Street, they also have artist spaces and retail. In the back of the project, there is an interior courtyard, and it also has a roof garden space. So this is a project that is very exciting because the original proposal had some accessibility, but through working with BPDA and with the developer, we have updated the design to have fully accessible units. All of the units will be adaptable, and the percentage, 5 or 10% actually, because it has city money, will be accessible. And that is in East Boston. That is under review, under BPDA. East Boston, Condor Street. I also want to share that this month, our colleague Sarah Leung was invited to present in a forum for the Young Professional in Transportation Shared Mobility conversation, and she did a great job representing our commission and sharing her valuable knowledge on matters of mobility and accessibility. So thank you for that, Sarah. And with that, that's it for me. Does anybody have any questions? Olivia?
Can you repeat what that last point you had after the Condor Street?
Yes, so the Condor Street is a new development under the review, and it will have accessible units and adaptable units.
Okay.
And it will be built in 3 parcels of city land.
Nice. Okay. Thank you. And the note about Sarah?
Sarah got invited to present at a young professional in transportation forum, and the conversation was about shared mobility.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your question.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, with that, we'll move to old business. Is there any old business that anyone wants to raise? The old action item Jessica had addressed. Jessica, do you have any further comment?
Yes, I believe there are 2 letters listed in old action items. One is the AAB letter that'll be sent out. There was another question regarding whether or not the board was writing a letter to TD Garden after their presentation. I went through the notes of the previous meeting, and I do not believe that the board voted to write a letter to TD Garden, simply that we would keep them, that the commission would keep the board informed of ongoing accessibility improvements and kind of keep that line of communication between the board and the commission and TD Garden. But I do not believe that there was a vote to write a letter. If I am wrong about that, it would not be the first time, but Carl's shaking his head no. So
Jessica, I agree with what you're saying. I think we left it that your office and the board would keep an open dialogue with the garden. So
great, thank you, Jerry. So I just wanted to update everyone on that, and I will send out the AAB letter to the board Thursday or Friday. I believe that's all I have, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Do we have new business?
The question, if how I mentioned earlier, if anybody wants to vote to write a letter about, what was the issue? About the dockless bikes.
Oh, and what would, can you remind me about?
Well, there's a hearing coming up next Monday for the dockless bikes, and I didn't know if the commission, the city council takes public testimony, and they also take letters. So if you wanted to vote to write a letter to talk about your positions, your concerns.
Carl?
Does it have to be due on Monday? Because that's only 2 business days. Can we turn one around that quickly?
Yeah, it's not due Monday. If anyone wants to come and testify, they could, if it does get written, they could read the letter on behalf of the commission, or people could just come and testify, for their own sake. It's up to you. It's up to you. I'm just raising the issue.
I make a motion that we write a letter.
Olivia seconds. We'll go ahead and take a vote then. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion passes to write a letter. Yeah, good.
I'll do it.
That's terrific. So you said the hearing is this coming Monday?
Yes.
Okay. Is that the time frame that, knowing how quickly Olivia is capable of marshaling her energies and getting things out, I think that's excellent representation for an issue that she's taken leadership on.
And it doesn't have to be lengthy. It could just basically raise the issues you're concerned about.
The only other new business item that I would just briefly mention, but it can be something to just be discussed further later, is that in situations where there are physical barriers, I was in contact with Patricia about an issue in my own neighborhood in the Back Bay area, And I was requesting information as a resident of Boston, not in an official capacity for the commission, but I asked her if there were templates or boilerplate language, and she did provide me with the citation, but just for future reference, we might think of trying to have a paragraph with that kind of language available to other people for going forward.
Great.
With that, we will then move on to public input. If there are members of the public who would like to come forward, if you could please come to the microphone and state your name. No? Well, we appreciate that you did join us this evening, and I just wanted to give you that opportunity. With that, then we will, is there a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Well,
Yeah,
are we,
Second it.
yeah. So with, we don't take a vote formally, do, oh, we'll take a vote then to adjourn? All in favor? Aye. Any oppositions? With that, we adjourn for to this evening. Thank you.